So the way we share data between those two components, we actually hard coded the data and then the data was getting shared between the components. That is not actually the practical way to solve such problem. What will happen if there are millions of data points in our data? We cannot just write it in our code. In such situation, we use a server where the data is kept and through some link we can see the data. You can remember we did something similar in JavaScript with the help of Ajax. We used get method to get the data from the server. We'll do the same thing in Angular now with the help of HTTP client module. Let's see how can we use this HTTP client module to have a GET request. Let's go back to our code now, and then we'll replace this with a service. We'll replace the hard-coded data to some link where a data is hosted. Okay, so now getting back to the code. So this is where the hard-coded data is. First thing we need to do, we must delete this. And here we'll return something which will be fetching the data from the link. So first thing, if we want to use a module, then we must import it in this imports list inside our app module.ts file. Let's start importing, and the thing which we want to import is HTTP client module. You can see there is no text after this HTTP client module. That means the code cannot find the path where it must be imported. So in such situation, it shows it in a different color. So we need to import it manually. I know where the position of this module is, so I'll write first the import, then within the curly braces, we write the name of the class or the module, HTTP client module, then from in a single quote, we'll write @Angular, then common, then a slash, and within the HTTP. So you can see as soon as we import it, and the HTTP client module in the list turns its color to green. So it's correctly imported now. Let's go back to our services file, the employee.service.ts file. And here, first we need to create a property which will be of type HTTP client. So let's use a shortcut by using private, and inside the constructor, we can specify the type of property which we want, and it will actually be the private property of the whole class. So the name of the variable we want is HTTP, and we want it to be of type HTTP client, and this should be imported from our HTTP module. So we'll click on the second one as it has automatic importation in it. So the HTTP client imports from HTTP. Then we use this HTTP private property and we'll return get method. This .http.get, and within this will provide a link where the data is being hosted. For the experiment purpose, we'll be using an open source data. Let's go and see what are the results fetch when we try to access the data from the link. Let's create a new tab, and I already have the link in my clipboard. So when you visit this https JSON placeholder.typecode.com/users, you get something like this. Here, as you can see, it's a JSON objects and there are actually 10 of them. You can see the ID equals 1, then there's a name, then there's a username and the email information and lots of information about a particular user. And there are in total 10 users with the ID 10 and each of them have a name. So we need not to change our HTML part because there also we were trying to print the name of the object. So I'll copy that link here. So whatever data we were getting in the browser, with the help of get method, we are actually returning it instead of the hard-coded list. As you can see, this is the object which will be returning here. Now let's go back to our component classes to actually accept this data. How we can accept the data is the form in which the data comes is of different type. And it has a lot of different information rather than just the core crux data. To actually extract this data, we use subscribe. We subscribe to particular form of data. And we can do this here in ng on init. So right after this get employee method is being called, we just add dot, then another method which is subscribe and the parentheses. But the catch is inside the subscribe, we need to specify the way the data we are extracting. So actually inside the subscribe parentheses, we need to give a function which tells the Angular in what variable do we actually want to save and what type of data we want to save. So we can use a shorthand description or an anonymous function using the arrow key, like the variable we can say is actually data which we are having, which is actually coming. And the arrow key goes to means for this data, what we need to do, we'll write the line, we'll write the expression here as in it's inside the function. So this actually replaces the way of making a function. It's a shorthand way of making a function. So inside the function, we want this dot employee is actually equal to the whole data which we are getting. We save this, and when actually we need to do the same thing in our component 2 or the second component. So let's just copy it and paste it in second component.ts file. So we paste it here and we need to import the services here too. Now let's go back to our page. Let's close this. And we can see and we can see that all the names are actually getting displayed here inside our first component and also inside our second component. So we are fetching the data from a client with the help of client from a server using HTTP client module and using services to actually send this data into two different components. So this is how we fetch the data from the server. Let's go back to our slide. So let's have a small recap of the things which we did. We used the get request to get the data from the server. Because we cannot hard code all the data in our code. That's why we need to store the data on a server and then fetch it using get request. As I talked earlier, it's something similar to what we did in Ajax. And later, in after using the get employee method, we subscribed, we added the subscribe method onto it, then gave a shorthand description of the function in which we want to save the data. And the way we achieved it using HTTP client module. So the first thing we did was added the HTTP client module in our imports module in app.module.ts file. Then we created a property of type HTTP client using a short way of doing it inside a constructor, writing private, then the variable name, which in our case was HTTP, and that is of type HTTP client. Later in the component file, we subscribed it and gave the way we want our data to be. And that's how we transferred the data using services and fetched it from a server. Synchronous versus asynchronous. And what is the meaning of synchronous code and what is the meaning of asynchronous code? So let's try to understand it uh, by the thing which we did right now. We extracted the data using get method from a server. In our dummy case, we were actually extracting data which was just a text. We were just printing the name of a person or the employee. What if it's not the name which we are printing? What if it's an image which we are actually, the name is actually in place of name, we are actually given some URL and that URL is actually some image. And at the end, we are actually displaying those images. What if some person in the whole list, in the whole 10 people, one gave a very big image, like tens and hundreds of MB of image? Then our code will be stuck at that point. It will try to, if our code is synchronous, which means if it goes line by line, follows the code and waits till the one code ends, and then the second part start. If our code works in this way, then our website, when we load that image, it will be stuck and it will not respond until unless the whole image is being loaded, which is clearly a bad idea. We don't want that. If every image is somehow big image and every image takes zero point 0.1 second to load, then we were printing, we were displaying 10 images. It will take total 1 second to display, which is quite slow in terms of website these days. Instead, what if each of the images actually start at the same time? That is the asynchronous code. Every image starts loading at the same time, and according to their size, they all finish. So our website will always be active and there will be data to be displayed at every time. So in this way, if every image is a big image and it takes zero point 0.1 second to display, to load that image and display, then the whole website will actually be loaded in just zero point 0.1 second because all the images are being loaded at the same time. And even if there's one big image, our website will not get stuck because it will still be displaying the whole other images, other 9 images, and the one image will be still in the loading phase. So that is not such a big problem. And the Angular does this automatically using the HTTP client method, and the later when we subscribed, this all thing is working in the background. We need not to worry about that, but it's still good to know how the images are being loaded. Let's know about routing in Angular and what is actually a routing in general. So Angular creates a one-page application. What does it mean? So in Angular, actually, all the content which we see on our page is actually everything is just one page. So imagine if you are on a Facebook and you're watching some video and you also want to see a comment. You click on more comments or the comments button. That does not refreshes the whole page just to get the data about the comments on that particular video. So that is something like one page application. The particular section which we were interested got updated, where else everything remained same. That helped us to save data on reloading. Otherwise, we would have to uh, send the whole data about the video back to the client, and that would make the whole system slow. So in Angular, we have this only one page application. Whatever we need gets loaded and reloaded, uh, but everything else remains static. And that's why it gives a better performance and a fast results. Let's know how can we actually then create routing. Routing means particular link for a particular page. Imagine if you have a website and there are different pages, like one for registration, one for shopping cart, one for new users, one for forgetting the password, and blah blah. There can be tens of hundreds of pages in your website. Then they have a unique URL for everyone. Every page has a new and a unique URL. Then how can we actually create that when we are saying our Angular is just one page application? How can we create 10 and hundreds of pages in a website when our whole website is just one page? So we create something called routing. So in Angular, you can specify with what link, with what name, which part you want to show to the whole page. Let's go back to our code and we'll try to display both our components with different links, and then we'll understand how we can use that to create multiple pages in our website. So let's go back to our code. And here in our app folder in source, there is a file named app routing module.ts. Let's click on that. Here we have a constant route of type routes equals to this empty array. So all we need to do is we need to add objects here, which are of type, which are actually telling for what name, which component should we show. So let's create two routes by giving two objects here. So inside this object, we need to give two things. One is path and the other one is the component we want to show. So after the path, we need to give exactly the name which we want, something like uh, our website name slash, it may be login, it may be register, it may be shopping cart. So that name which comes after this particular slash, we need to specify that text here, that string here. So let's say with our website address slash first, we want to display just the first component, and with slash second, we just want to display the second component. So after path, we need to give first, and after component, we need to give the name of our first component, which is first component, and it also click on the one which automatically imports it. So we have this one object created. Let's similarly create the second one with the path is equals to second, and in our component it is second component, and also import it at the same time. Let's save it, and then let's try to go to our page and let's refresh our page. And when we try, okay, let's just see In our second component, we just have that second work here till all these 10 names. So let's try to go to second now. We see there's nothing. Actually, we are on just the same page. So we actually need to do one more thing. And that is we need to go to our parent HTML page, which is app component.html. Here we have these selectors which are actually selecting the two components. First, we need to hide each of them because now we are using route to display the components rather than directly calling them here. So now we must add router outlet and an Angular HTML element which controls whatever should be displayed here. So now when we'll go back to our page and then we specify the link, that router outlet will replaced by the app first component or the app second component. So this is how the Angular makes it work. So let's try to go to our page now and let's try to go to first. We see there is no second component. There is just the first component. Let's try to go to second. We only see second works. There is and the other 10 names. There is no first component. So with each link, now we can actually go to that particular component. But when we go to our localhost 420 website, there is no page because we did not define anything when there is nothing after a slash. That's why it's showing nothing because it does not know which component to show in that case. Then to solve this, we must go back here and there are two ways which we can do. First, either we can just add a new path which says when there is nothing, then also show maybe only the first component. Let's go back and we can see when there's nothing, it's still showing the component first because that is what we wanted. When there's nothing after the local address, then show the first component. But here we are actually repeating ourselves. We need not to do this. We can just refer this component as we can use redirect to, and then we can specify the link which was slash first. And when it should go when there is a full path match. So path match equals to full. So here I'm saying when there's nothing after a slash or there's even not a slash, redirect to the slash first. And what is at slash first? At slash first, we have component first. And when should we go when there's a full path match? Path match is full, which means there is nothing, exactly nothing after our main local address. So let's try to go back to our local address and see it redirects to ourselves back to the first website slash first because we said to redirect it to slash first and we see the first page. But what if a person writes something extra? Like we have only defined it for first, second. What if person tries to reach third slash third? We see nothing. That is something which we don't want. If a person tries to go to some URL which is not defined, we can actually make that using a wildcard. So let's say when there is nothing or there's a new thing which we have not defined yet and some person types that after slash, then we must show that no, you are at wrong page if you are suggesting If you have typed it wrong, you can go to our local page, or if we want to show them 404 error that this URL does not exist, or we can just redirect them to the first component, showing them that you are on the wrong page. This is our home page. So when we don't know exactly what the input would be, we use this wildcards. What are this? Exactly, we create a new object here, and in the path we give 2 stars. These 2 stars indicate that it's a variable input. This can be anything. And if this can be anything, and in that case, it should go to second component. So let's try to go back to our page, and let's try to go to /third now. Even if it's /third, the URL stays at /third, but the content which we see is the component second. But note that this wildcard path should be added at the end. Otherwise, it will, if we add it at the top or somewhere in between, it will accept every form of input. So if we place it above first, so let's try to place it above first, and then go to a localhost 420/first. Even then, we are only getting to the second component because that wildcard input will take anything, and because it's defined above the first, it's taking place there, and it sees that okay, first is also anything, so we should go to second component. So that's why we should always keep it at the bottom, so that it does not interfere with all the things which we actually want it to go to. So just keep it at the end and our page will work fine. So this is how actually we have routing in Angular. Let's have a small recap. So when we go to http/localhost 420 slash maybe the component to 1 page or the component 2 page, we get different result according to which we have defined what should come after this slash, after this localhost address. Then the string which comes after the slash is connected to some component, and that connection is made inside the routes by giving objects with two which with two inputs. One is path and the other one is component.